Okay. Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome from Cologne. A very warm welcome to the 12th edition of Astronomy on Tap Cologne. I am Shashwata, and I will be your host for today evening. And today we are going to talk about a topic that is very close to all our hearts. So we're not going to only look at the sky and wonder what is going on there, but we're going to try and connect it to what is also happening all around us. And we're going to talk about the relation between climate change and astronomy. And to discuss this with us, we have a very exciting speaker with us, and it is my great pleasure to welcome Andrea Gokus to us. Hi, Andrea. Thanks for joining us. So it's my job to introduce you. So Andrea is a PhD student at the Remes Observatory in Bamberg, as well as she's also working at the University of Würzburg. She is usually working on blazars, which is not what she will talk to us today about. Maybe we get her for blazars another time, but today she is going to talk to us about the climate change, which is also a passion of hers. Talking about such topics. She's doing a lot of public outreach usually, so you can definitely check out her webpage and her Twitter handle. We will link it in the YouTube link below. She has also given an Astronomy on Tap talk before in Bonn, so not so far from here. She's also working as a guide at the observatory in Bamberg. So lots of things. Definitely do check out her website. And today she is talking to us as a member of the Astronomers for Planet Earth community, which is a community of astronomers that focus on sustainable practices in astronomy. And we will probably hear a bit more about that, but I don't want to ramble on. So I will hand over to Andrea, but just before that, I want to say that, so we will have the talk, we will have a little bit discussion session. So you're more than welcome to join us in the discussion. If you're watching on YouTube, do write your comments, questions. If you do not agree with some opinions, do write it as a comment or a question, and we will ask Andrea on your behalf, and then we will have an Astro News session as well. So that's all from me. Andrea, the floor is all yours.
Thanks a lot. So let me start, because I brought some slides and I want to share them with you. So can you please confirm if you see everything correctly?
Yes, everything works.
Okay, that is great. Hello, everyone. Thanks a lot for having me and inviting me to give this talk about the connection of the climate crisis and astronomy. And if you listen to Astronomy on Tap Talks, usually what you hear about is something exciting and fascinating that we study in space. But today will be a little bit different. If you hear about Astronomers for Planet Earth for the first time, for example, you might ask yourself, why is she talking about the climate crisis? She's an astronomer. Astronomers study the universe. We study space, everything outside of the Earth. Well, one could start connecting astronomers with a phrase that is usually heard during demonstrations, for example, at the Fridays for Future demonstrations. And this phrase is, there is no planet B. But is there really no planet B? Because there is a field of astronomy that searches exactly for such a planet. Exoplanets have been, there's more and more attention rising up for exoplanets over the last years. And that is because the basic motivation that drives this research is to find a planet that is able to sustain life, and also whether there is other life out there, and if we could find a second Earth. And for now, there have been discovered about 4,000 exoplanets, so quite a lot already. And the number will probably double and triple over the next, I don't know, 5 to 10 years or so, with better instruments that are developed and sent to space. So what we actually found, I could tell you one example where one could think, well, there's our planet B, right? And that is the planet Proxima Centauri b. And the very interesting thing here is that actually Proxima Centauri, the star that it orbits, is our closest neighbor. So there is no other star that is so close to us. And light and this planet is even orbiting its star within the star's habitable zone. So it is possible that if a planet is within this habitable zone, that there's theoretically a possibility that there could be liquid water on its surface. It depends on different factors, of course, but I don't want to talk about this now. The only thing is that even though it's the closest neighbor, for light, it takes even still 4 years to travel there. So that means if someone was sitting on this planet, Proxima Centauri B, and you want to ask this person, alien, whatever, something, it wouldn't take 4 years for this person to get the message, and then it would take another 4 years until we get the answer. So it takes 8 years in total to even communicate just once. And light has the fastest speed there is, so we can't even travel at light speed. So for us, it would take generations, hundreds of years to even travel there. So even though there are exoplanets out there that might be able to sustain life and that feel like they are within our reach, they are not our planet B that we could maybe go to and just kind of start from scratch. But our solar system has more than one planet, more than just Earth. And especially Mars has been a lot in the media, gained more and more over the recent years. And that is because especially NASA and SpaceX, they are planning manned missions to Mars. So for the first time, humans in probably the next decade or so, humans will travel there and stand on another planet. However, we can't just all move to Mars. There are several things that make this very, very difficult endeavor. One is the travel. So traveling there would take us just 6 months. That's not the problem. However, zero gravity has a huge influence on, for example, muscle degeneration or a reduction of the bone structure, at the bone substance, I mean. And there's also the radiation from which astronauts at the ISS are currently shielded by the magnetic field of the Earth. But once you travel to Mars, you don't have this protection anymore. And that alone is not even the only danger. Even living on Mars is no cake. Mars doesn't contain or sustain an atmosphere, a breathable atmosphere, and the atmosphere that we have there is not as dense as the Earth atmosphere as well. It's colder there, and there's also no water abundant. So the missions that will be sent there, it will be about pure survival. And for the next missions, we will only see a few researchers travel there that are able to work and live under these harsh conditions. So actually, the statement about there is no planet B is really true. But also it seems like astronomers, well, we study space, we study stuff that is far, far beyond our reach. So we can't really help the climate research or something about what's happening. We can't contribute with our knowledge to a solution in that way. However, we are affected by the climate crisis. And I want to show you a few examples of what threats are that we have to deal with, apart from all the other threats that are affecting us just as normal citizens. This is an example of that was just happening last year, where 2 observatories in California were threatened by a wildfire. Oh, well, actually, there were 2 different wildfires. And these wildfires have been growing larger and larger over the last recent years. And this is a direct consequence of the global heating and the accompanying droughts. And while the telescope domes and the telescopes itself are not damaged, and so the observatories were kind of lucky, in one case, a few buildings even burned down. So these fires were really, really close, as you can also see from these pictures. Another different consequence of something that happened was a recent flooding that, for example, happened this year for a few weeks ago in Germany, that are not related to the flooding in New York, which are that are happening currently, that are caused by the remainder of the hurricane. In Germany, we don't have hurricanes, it's related to something different. But nevertheless, in Western Germany, there was severe flooding. Entire villages were completely destroyed. And in this area, there also is a telescope. In this case, it's a radio telescope that is the radio telescope of Effelsberg. And while they were also lucky because they had a few power outages, but the main dish, this is a 100-meter dish, by the way, was not damaged itself, still this field here got flooded. And this field is not empty. I mean, it contains the building, but okay, this is not astronomical equipment. But down here, you can see that these tiny panels maybe. And these are radio antennas from a low frequency array that is part of a bigger network in Europe called LOFA. And these were destroyed. So our equipment is directly affected by this. Another thing that also will become a problem within the next decades or so, but that we can't see immediately, or we don't feel the effects immediately, is the sea level rise. And this is a global problem because many cities exist very close to coastal lines. And in some cases, entire countries are threatened by this. For example, the Netherlands. The Netherlands are not that, it's not a big country, but they have a lot of astronomy research. Just to name a few, there is the University of Amsterdam, and also the European Space Agency has a site there in Noordwijk. Among these direct threats that have to do with the direct consequences, the natural catastrophes that are caused by the climate crisis, there's also an indirect threat. And this has something to do with the social aspect and our way of how we do our research or what we are researching. And the thing is, we do fundamental research. We have already found out that we can't really help in finding another planet to just settle. So what we are doing is just answering questions or finding answers for questions regarding the universe itself. And we want to understand what we're made of, what everything is about, and how everything comes together. But this does not help us directly for our life on Earth. And this does not only include astronomy, this includes all kind of fundamental research that also, for example, can involve chemistry or mathematics. So all these sciences are also threatened by this as well. And what I mean by threatening is that as fundamental researchers, we are funded by public money. So this is not a problem now. But if the climate crisis goes really, really bad, countries might decide that they don't want to give money away just for fundamental research that doesn't help tackling a crisis that is happening right now. And therefore, it might become a privilege, maybe a luxury to do astronomy, to do fundamental research. And at least in my opinion, I think it would be really a step backwards because fundamental research is what will help humanity in the future and helps us kind of evolving and answering the big questions. And if we can't do this anymore, it would be really, really sad, especially since the climate crisis is something that we brought upon ourselves. And we are able to tackle it. We are able to do something against it. But if we just won't, then it's our own fault. And as an astronomer, I mean, I could say, oh no, the situation is so bad for us, but we're the good guys. Well, yeah, we also have a big contribution to carbon emissions, actually. And this has to do with how we work and how we perform our work and how we are connected. And I just want to give you an example, just to what it looks like for an astronomer, because we travel a lot. We travel to conferences to meet other researchers. We have research stays where we stay, for example, at an institute for just a month or so. And we also have to move quite often until we get a fixed position after we do our PhD. So traveling is kind of, or has been until the Corona pandemic at least, something that comes with the job description. And this is a flight profile of a senior researcher. That's why there's so many flights already. And this data is from 1993 to 2016. Including more than 1,000 flights and more than 300 tons of carbon emissions were put out because of that. And when we look up on so these flights are not just, we don't have kind of an average flights per year that we take, but the more and more we progress and continue to climb up career ladder, basically, the more and more we travel, actually. And this has to do with that, for example, the further you go ahead, the more money you have that you can spend on traveling to meet other colleagues. You're invited more to conferences. And also you might become part of more collaborations that also meet. And the main thing why we have to travel is, that I might have forgotten to mention, is we are not working just with people within our own country. We are working as an international team. So every project that I've worked on so far has always involved someone that just lives abroad. So this is really typical, also because we sometimes just stay for 2 or 3 years at a place and then continue to work with the people that were there afterwards. So this is just part of how we work. And we are aware of that. And since so many astronomers are actually worried about the climate crisis, and which actually resulted in founding of Astronomers for Planet Earth, which I'm also a member of. And it is a grassroots movement, and it includes people that are just astronomy students up to tenured professors. And what is really, really fascinating or great is that although it was just founded about 2 years ago, it has now more than 1,100 members. So it has really, really grown over the very short time that it exists still. And why we are not climate scientists, we can't do climate researchers, or we are not engineers that can develop better, more efficient solar panels or whatever. What we can do and what we do is we share our astronomical perspective on the climate crisis. And we do this, for example, by talking to the public, just as I'm doing now. There are other talks out there available where some other people from A4E are talking on their perspective. So you could check that out as well. Another thing that you could also already see in the previous slides is that we can look at our own contributions and try to think about what we can do about it, how we reduce our carbon emissions. And the latest action item that we did was publishing or sending out an open letter that we asked every astronomer, or anyone that, well, includes also astronomy students, right, to sign this letter if they think that the climate crisis is something that we should tackle, that we should go ahead and make a change and not just wait until other people do it or until it's too late. So this letter was written to the astronomical institutes that they need to acknowledge sustainability as one of their primary goals, and to make it a priority also to mitigate our own contribution in forms of carbon emissions. And since it was signed by more than 2,700 people, astronomers, this shows, since this number is double the members of A4E, that there are also more astronomers out there that really support this. So I said we are assessing our own contribution, and we are scientists, and most of us, not all of us, but most of us work with some kind of data. So what we kind of did was just taking and looking at our own data regarding our own carbon footprint and analyze this in order to draw conclusions from that. And I want to introduce a few of these studies that we made, and that all came out last year already. But again, keep in mind that just 2019, it was founded 2020. There were already these analyses available and published. So this is really fast, because we kind of decided that we really need to act now and very fast, and not wait just another 5 years. So this one study was looking at a particular meeting that is quite large, the annual meeting of the European Astronomical Society. The meeting in 2019 took place in Lyon in France. And this is basically the data that they got for the flights, the emissions for the flights of the people traveling there. And while it's an European meeting, you can see that there are also people coming to this meeting from Los Angeles or Sydney. So usually, even though it's often, or it tends to be, it is the European meeting, there are still international or other outer European people taking part in it. And the nice thing here was that, so this was the data, this was the meeting that took place in 2019. It's an annual meeting, so it also took place last year and also this year, but on last year it was moved to a virtual place because, well, the Corona pandemic happened. But this was a very good opportunity to actually compare a full in-person meeting with a meeting that was fully held online. And it might surprise you how large the number is, but the difference in the carbon footprint is about 3,000. So the virtual meeting had a carbon footprint that was about 3,000 times smaller. And this is a huge difference. Another study or two other studies that are compared here are looking at basically the general carbon emissions related to work. Either this one was done for Australian astronomers in general, and the other one was just assessing the carbon emissions for an institute in Germany, the Max Planck Institute for Astronomy, which is in Heidelberg. And you can see two things in this plot here directly when comparing. An Australian astronomer has a much larger carbon footprint than someone working at MPIA. And the main contributors to carbon emissions are electricity and flights. The numbers that are given here is the carbon emissions in tons of CO2 per year and per researcher, so per person, because we really need to look at like a head count basically. And you could think, well, if you're sitting in Germany or you're a German astronomer, you think, yeah, well, the Australians are really bad, but the Germans, they just have less than half of it. That's totally fine. Then I have bad news for you, because this is the average carbon emission budget that we have as maximum per year per person in Germany, or will have to have in Germany in 2030, if the German government takes their pledge very seriously when it comes to reducing the carbon footprints in general of each citizen. So we need to cut also for example, the emission by someone from the Max Planck Institute in half anyway. And one can also see from that, so we have 18 tons here, and it should be less than 7, that just, for example, just deciding to never fly again will not even we won't even reduce it to that limit. So we really need to tackle all the things that are contributing to our carbon emissions here, and not just focus on one thing. And last one, that is just the study that is in preparation at the moment, is where we are also taking the flight emissions from conferences in 2019, so also before Corona, obviously. And what we want to do here is we're looking at the meetings that took place internationally in every country wherever this information is publicly available. And what we want to do with this study is also to draw conclusions on how we should plan meetings in the future if we want to do in-person meetings. So from these studies alone, one can already draw some conclusions and what we can actively do or call on doing. And one thing is to really avoid flying. So this is just, there's something, well, the Corona pandemic was very bad in so many ways, but it has really shown us that working online and having conferences online is possible. Yes, there are some problems with it, and it's not great to sit just in front of your computer all the time, every day. And there are so many meetings now, so it's kind of a bit of an overflow, but still, it is in theory very easy and possible to do this. And among reducing carbon emissions, it also has another effect, which is it increases inclusivity. The other one is, as you have seen already, that electricity is a large part of the carbon emissions, is that we need to switch to renewable energy sources. And while institutes itself are usually kind of bound to the politics that are happening and that are in the country, and you don't kind of create your own solar panel, we can still try to put an influence and, for example, ask universities to use their influence and switch to renewable energy sources. Or in case of the European Southern Observatory, you can also build your own solar panel array. And they have also recently, they are one of the larger organizations that are now actively doing something to reduce their carbon footprint. For example, they are also switching their cars from their fleet to a hybrid, not a hybrid, to electric cars in general. So to conclude from this, I asked in the beginning, or the title of my talk was, does the climate crisis matter for astronomy? And I hope I made my point clear that it really, really does. Also, as astronomers, we are not the victim totally. We are also contributing to carbon emissions, and actually we do this more than an average person and more than we should. The good thing here is that we are doing something against it. We are currently assessing the status quo, and we are working and pushing for a system change and reducing the carbon footprint of astronomy, or the field of astronomy altogether. And the thing here is that not many fields have done that yet. And as astronomers, we can really be a role model here. And why that is, or why we really should be, is because we have this astronomical perspective. We know how precious Earth is, and how really there is no planet B that we can just travel to. And so I want to end this talk with an image that is called the pale blue dot. And this image was taken by the Voyager 1 spacecraft in 1990, when it was beyond the orbit of Neptune, so very far away from Earth, and it looked back into the solar system and made a picture of the Earth. And looking at, you might wonder, where is Earth? There's Earth. So it's really this tiny dot, this tiny speckle. And I couldn't phrase it any better than the person that actually requested this image, Carl Sagan, who is also an astronomer. And so I want to end with what he said about this image. Look again at that dot. That's here. That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you ever heard of, every human being who ever was, lived out their lives. The Earth is the only world known to harbor life. There is nowhere else, at least in the near future, to which our species could migrate. Visit? Yes. Settle? Not yet. Like it or not, for the moment, the Earth is where we make our stand. So thanks for your attention. And now I'm really looking forward for the discussion.
Thanks a lot, Andrea. That was a fascinating talk. I clap on behalf of everybody, including our viewers on YouTube. So once again, to mention, if you have any questions for Andrea, or any comments, anything you would like to discuss, do leave a comment in the YouTube chat. While we wait for that, I think I have way too many questions, but maybe I kind of initiate the question session anyway. So you mentioned when you were talking about the online talks, it was relatively brief, but you mentioned that apart from the question of, ease of making these online conferences, there's also the question of inclusivity. Could you elaborate a bit on that?
Yes. So something that one might not see, because one is just, if one is lucky enough, then one is at the bubble meeting all these astronomers, and one has never really to think about it. But there are many people excluded from visiting conferences, and this has several reasons. One reason is, for example, that it's quite expensive to travel, especially if you have to take long distance flights. The conference fees and the hotels are also not cheap. So when you are at a department, or you are doing astronomy in a country where there's not much public money available for your research, well, then you kind of really have to choose like one meeting or so, while others, for example, in Europe, can travel to 3 or 4 meetings in that same time. Another one is mobility issues, because not all of us are able, for example, to walk around. So for people in wheelchairs, it's quite difficult, or other disabilities, it's difficult, much more difficult, depending on how how good you are on foot or not, to travel around. Also often more expensive, especially if you need someone to accompany you. There's also an issue that for going to a conference, I mean, in Europe, we are super lucky that we can just travel around within most European countries just by sitting in a car or just flying there. We don't need a visa or anything. But if, for example, lots of conferences are taking place in the US, and the US has a much more strict policy on that. And for some countries, it's nearly impossible to get a visa. So you kind of are excluded just because of your country of origin from a certain conference. And then there's also people that maybe not, apart from the money issue, are also having other responsibilities at home. I've seen many people that were happy that these meetings were taking place online, because now, for example, when they just became a mother like 3 months ago or so and couldn't travel because they didn't want to leave their newborn, they could just participate from home, no problem.
Right. Yeah, very interesting points. That's definitely kind of true that, you know, it's the internet is kind of like an equalizer and makes it a more level field and more accessible field for everybody. But, you know, I mean, of course, also, as we all know, that there's also some, not everything is positive about online meetings. We do miss the personal touch, the personal interaction. So going forward in the future, in let's say 10 or 15 years down the line, how do you think a responsible, sustainable astronomy institute will look like? How will they arrange for conferences? How will they arrange for who is flying, who not, when not?
Yeah. Before I answer that, should I stop sharing the screen?
I think it's a nice quotation, but we can also stop sharing, and maybe if something comes up and one of the slides need to be shown, you can share again. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Because I think you mentioned something about seeing our faces while we discuss. So yeah, I have the slides ready in case we want to look at something particular again. So yeah, online meetings. It's a I think that the benefits outweigh the problems or the inconveniencies. And well, it also, so I've taken part in several different meetings, and at one point you start really noticing on what's done well and what really doesn't work. So in a way, some things will definitely be adapted and can be improved. What a few people have, for example, tried, for example, Vanessa Moss, and she published a paper also on this about the future of meetings, where they did a meeting in a virtual space, so really with these VR goggles and everything. So while this is probably also quite exhausting for your head, at least it gives you a different feeling than just sitting in front of the screen. And there are also attempts, or I think what we will probably not be able, especially after everyone has had to sit at home for more than 1 year or so, is to just push only for online meetings. But there's also the idea of hybrid meetings, in a way that people can both attend virtually and in person at the location. However, one really needs to take care that a lot of the communication is also done online, such that people that take place virtually are not excluded. There's also an idea of having local hubs. So, for example, for the European Astronomy Society meeting, one could have local hubs in each country, for example, where people would meet locally there, and you could directly network with people there and also network with other online. In Europe, it's also a bit easier because we can, at least within Europe, we can, in most cases, or well, at least regarding Western Europe, we can move around by train. And while that still takes a bit of time, one could really think of making this more an option for people that travel. Often, even though you even if we prefer to just sit in the train for a day instead of flying somewhere within 3 or 4 hours, often it's too expensive, and then the university just wants you to take the cheapest trip. So we can really, this is something where the universities and institutes can make a change by, that's why we wrote the open letter to make sustainability and these things a primary goal. And then, yeah, so I know that some people say they have a problem also connecting with people online. I think that Astronomers for Planet Earth are the best example of how this can work, because I've those people that I didn't know before, I've never met them in person. I've met them via Zoom, and I've just written with them in the Slack space, for example, and it totally works out fine. It's great. I feel like I really know these people, and it just works. So I think what also needs to a little bit change, and I think this will become a problem or be a bit problematic, to really convince everyone that we need to at least switch something in our head, that we also see the benefits of that, and not just think of, honey, we want everything like it was before. And I think this will also take some time.
Right.
I think you can sway a lot of those people who would like to have physical conferences by just sending them food vouchers by email. So they could just go to their, local cafeteria and have the food while they're in the lunch break of the conference, and that would dispel a lot of rebellion. But I'm also concerned. Have we already discussed how important it is to have vegan food in conferences? Because we have discussed this before, that 25% of all emissions are from non-vegetarian sources. So, what do you think? Is there some chatter about that that you guys have heard, or Andrea, do you know if it's being discussed among the organizing astronomers for future conferences?
I have not been part in an organizing committee for a conference longer than a day, but even there, it's often not really directly connected to the climate crisis or our carbon footprints. It's more about that more and more people are choosing to be vegetarian or vegan, and then realizing that there is not a really good alternative. For the study that I showed, there was accounted, the one for the MPIA emission, it was accounted for the meat in the cafeteria, but there it only made up less than 1%. But I don't know how they put all this together. I think that the food choices are more relevant in their private lives, but if you go to a conference, and in some countries, it's just, if you're vegetarian, you're kind of an alien, right? There are these countries, I've been to them. So, and I think this is something that we should also be aware. And on that regard, also, it's often kind of a little bit peer pressured, that it's normal that people just go to a bar and they discuss science while drinking alcohol. And when you don't drink alcohol, you're also looked at with a weird face. So these are the things where I think it is important to actually be more tolerant and think more sustainable, or just be more accepting towards people's own choices. And if you are in a conference, at least the ones that I attended, there were most meals I could just either, I was at the hotel or whatever, where I could choose, and only the conference dinner was really organized by the organizing committees. But it's still an important topic to keep in mind.
Right. Great point, Parit, and thanks for pointing this out, Andrea. I think regarding what you said about conferences and people having problems, I think what we also need to really think is that we've only done this for 1 year, whereas physical conferences, we've been doing them year after year. So we've learned from our mistakes, what we've done wrong. And I imagine that also if we do online conferences for a year, that, we will no longer make conferences which are 8 hours with 3 15-minute breaks in between. Just realize that people cannot stare at the screen that long. And I'm sure we will learn much better and, find out good strategies for that. On this note, so there's a comment from Carsten Kama. He says, thank you very much for this great talk. And he makes a comment that aside from traveling to conferences, observatory visits are also a cause of headache. Remote observations cannot fully replace on-site visits. Do you have any comment on this also as an observer? I imagine.
I'm not an optical astronomer, so I've never got to go to the big telescopes in the Atacama Desert or Hawaii, so I'm sad about that. But for example, I'm observing with the radio telescope in Effelsberg. So this is in Germany, it's not that far away. But I'm part of a monitoring program where we have to observe every 3 to 4 weeks. And I'm quite happy that I can do this remotely and not travel there each time, because it would take much more money and much more time. More money also, but this would be paid by the university, so it doesn't affect me. So I think, or at least I know that for some observations that are done very remotely, like at the ESO telescopes in Chile, those also offer to have that your observation is done for you, but it can also often prove more worth that the person that will analyze the data later, that this person also does the observation. And in some cases, you kind of need to decide, for example, which object you're looking, or if you want to change something in your setup. And observing is something that is very directly connected to us astronomers. And I'm not saying, and none of us are saying that we should all day long now never go out, always stay at home, because still it is more about what can we replace such that we reduce our carbon emissions and not just like cancel everything. And I think one would need to prioritize there a bit better, and really think whether something is necessary and how to do the best out of it, that the carbon emissions are as low as you can go.
Right. Yeah, great point. I mean, the point is, I think, as you said, not to like forbid it, that you cannot do this, but really be aware of what we're doing and what the consequences of each of our actions, and try to do everything better. So Volker also commented on the topic of observatory trips, and he said that we will not be able to quickly stop observatory trips, but on the long run, there is anyway the tendency towards more and more remote observations. This needs to be further supported. This, I guess, is exactly true.
Yeah, we will see where this is going. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, especially when it comes to equipment, but also to other things that we are looking at in the study. I think I have some feedback.
Sorry. Yeah, Craig, could you mute yourself?
That's me. I'm sorry. I'm mute.
Okay. That we are looking at with this study about the flight emissions caused by conferences in 2019 is we distinguish between conferences and something that is also organized for people early in their career, which are winter or summer schools, because to have them might be the case that people going to a school might benefit more from that if they attend in person than online, than going to a conference online. And these are the things that we need to think about on what to prioritize and where we think it's worth to meet in person. And if one critically thinks back about meetings, conferences, or visits, and think back of what was really worth it, probably not all of the trips were. And for some, you sometimes you even just think, yeah, this was a bit of a waste of time. At least I didn't have to pay it. So, and again, in regard to observing, we will see how the future generations of telescopes are built. And often it is also very helpful to have remote observations because, for example, if you have regular observations, you can just do this from home. But I think for most instruments, it should be important that the people that requested the data and are analyzing the data can be included in some way in the process of obtaining the data. However, me as an X-ray and gamma ray astronomer, I just send my proposal to an X-ray observatory and then they just observe it. And I mean, I can ask for different observing modes and everything, but in the end, I'm not the one making the decisions. So I think the optical astronomers, for example, they are quite lucky that they can really work with the telescopes themselves.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. Thanks. I mean, yeah, it's a bit sad that you cannot go to an X-ray observatory. Well, I mean, of course you cannot go, but that you're not more involved, unfortunately. On the note of remote observations, Travis Rector comments that remote observations have a lot of other benefits, such as scheduling observations for ideal conditions and rapid response astronomy. It enables new kinds of science. Any comments on that?
Yeah, it feels. I think in the audience there are a few experts on that. So, but yeah, I mean it's true. As I said, it's in case of some rapid changes, it's just much easier, and for example, to just continue observing later or just scheduling stuff. So, of course, it's great to go to your remote observatory. It's super impressive to go there, but in a way, maybe if we really don't want astronomers to miss out on this opportunity, a way that we could do this would be to have early career folks that do this for the first time, to allow them to travel there and do that, but not have the same people come over and over again.
Right. Yeah, that would be a solution. So you kind of get included in the process, you know how it works, but then you don't do it for the 15th time when you're probably just bored anyway of going in the middle of nowhere and being there. But yeah, great point. Another question I had, and this I'm playing a little bit the devil's advocate, but just to ask you. So, I sometimes wonder that we are, sitting in front of our computers or in our observatories and we are doing this kind of fundamental science. And you touched upon this topic, but maybe you can expand a bit. It feels a little bit, that the world is burning and we're like Nero playing our violin, we're trying to find out things about the universe. How do you think, if somebody comes to you tomorrow and asks you, hey, what the hell, this much is happening, how can you sit in your office and do fundamental science? Like, how do you think we can justify studying such an esoteric subject which does not really have any immediate benefits to the problems around us? How do we justify doing fundamental science in a time of global crisis?
Yeah, I think it's a common problem of researchers that people are referring to us sitting in an ivory tower and just shutting everything out. And well, I can't give you, I think, a good answer because it is fundamental research. I don't actively research on something that helps us solving the climate crisis, but I can acknowledge it. I can try to find ways to reduce my carbon footprint, both in my private or the thing about carbon footprints is also and can also trigger another discussion about where this came from. But I can push for a change in the system that we will overall reduce carbon emissions. And since, for example, I do this mostly currently just by my work by doing astronomy, and for example travel to conferences there much more than I travel around the globe for just pleasure. This is something where I can still help to change our system. And the other thing about the individual contribution. So the thing is, you could tell people, you're flying and that's really bad. You can really, this flight shaming has increased over the years, and I'm not super happy with it, because if people want to travel, they have no other option, and you need planes, they work with kerosene, and this puts out lots of carbon dioxide. You can't do anything else, even traveling by a ship, and you say okay, then it takes me 2 weeks or whatever to get there. This isn't better than just taking the plane, just because it maybe takes longer though. So it is really our society that needs to change our ways on how we, for example, produce electricity or how we travel, and then everyone can make the choices. I mean, if you would, the problem there also lies in the politics, and also the German politicians, they are also not doing a great job of it yet, because I think this is a European policy about the flight tax, about carbon emissions. It was just recently introduced, and I don't know if it's accepted yet, but the thing here is they will put a carbon tax on flights that you do when you go to vacation on, I don't know, Ibiza or so, and but they will leave out the flights with private jets and also cargo flights. And then you sit there and think, why the hell, for example, are they still allowing or not putting the tax on, especially on private jets? And this comes back again, where people that have a lot of money and have a very high living standard, their contribution to carbon dioxide emissions is much larger, and they are still benefiting. These people are still benefiting from this. And this is something that I can't choose. If I want to go somewhere, and if I want to have a vacation somewhere else than where I can go by train, for example, I need to fly, and I can't choose between something that is very eco-friendly or not.
Yeah, right, exactly. I mean, it's not always about the individual's responsibility, but often about the collective responsibility, right? Like, even if you have 2 options, if one option is 10 times more expensive than the other, then it's not possible for everybody to always make these choices. But yeah, it's
I think you really need capitalism to get on board and make the sustainable solution the cheaper one, the one where a company says, but it's cheaper for me to recycle than to just throw it away. And this is the place where we need to go. And coming back to the original question on why I am, how I can kind of defend myself for doing fundamental research. Well, it is my job. I love doing it. And one thing that I can at least fight for is that how we do better and be a role model. And everything that I said in my talk is not exclusive for the field of astronomy. Other researchers in different kind of fields, they also travel. They also need electricity. So basically, this is where scientists, and as scientists, we kind of have a bit of the responsibility to understand the data that is before us and to see the problems that come with global heating and to act accordingly and try to improve the situations, because many other people don't even have the choice or really can't push for any change. But we, for example, can push for change in the institutes and the universities, and even try to influence politics towards a more sustainable way.
Right. Thanks for that. Just to be clear, I was not, it wasn't directed at you in any sort
I know,
of,
it's fine. Like it's totally fine. No, I know how you meant the question.
Yeah, it's a question I ask myself often. On this note, Volker makes a very interesting comment. He says that we can use our fundamental research as a vehicle to address the global problems, providing information such as there is no planet B, and compute solutions to that. So like how PV works, I guess he means pressure volume work, or I'm not sure.
Yeah, this has something to do with what we as astronomers or scientists in general working at the university, we are also lecturers of the people that are attending, so the students. And you can start not talking to them directly and having the full go on parade about the climate crisis, but you can give them the tools to think critically. You can teach them about the basic physics and really help them to understand the data that is presented to them in the news. And so Travis Vector, who's also probably still listening, hi. So he mentioned once that especially in the US, there's kind of a system where when they attend college, they need to have at least one science class. This is not in Germany, it's a bit different because you choose your subject on university and you just have lecturers in that region, but in college in the US, you need to apparently pick a science topic. And many people many people pick astronomy because, you know, it's very interesting and fancy and stuff, and you can look at pretty pictures. But one thing that you can also teach them there is, for example, about climate related stuff. For example, the atmosphere and the glass house effect on Venus, for example, and then in this way teach them about physics and give them the right tools to understand other things, not only the related to the climate crisis, but in this particular thing, one can really help them to tackle and to work with the information and critically assess the information that is given to them about the climate crisis.
So you would say that we can kind of increase the critical perspective and scientific knowledge. We can help increase that among younger people and among people who may not be professional scientists.
Whenever we can, whenever we have to do public outreach, we can, if it fits, kind of address this topic. And especially if we teach in a class at a university, or if we go visit schools, we can always find a way to put this in there. We don't need to have the full blown information on them, just a few things that might later on help them understand stuff, or to rethink stuff, or to think further. And this is something, I mean, that we just do also for other topics, and especially studying physics is, well, everything there is kind of, or most of it, is related to fundamental research. And when we go in industry, people are not asking you to do specifically something that you did that you learned by studying. You learn to think critically and to analyze things. And this is what our skills and the skills that we teach. And that can also help to understand all the information that is given, and sometimes really tampered with, regarding, for example, also the climate crisis, or also the global pandemic. Yeah.
Right. Great point. Parit, I thought you had a question. I spoke before you.
Yeah, I thought Andrea would like to demand some private jet people to put gamma ray telescopes on the plane, so that at least they would have some sort of you know, we could also no, this is actually a serious point, that astronomers generally, what the tone I hear is that we are always talking of how much we can do individually, or how much we can adjust to the world and still do our research. But I think we can be more proactive politically, in the sense that we can also demand, for example, land to be given to us, so that we can make a small observatory there, and the rest of the land has to be completely dark, because that's what we need. And by definition, if you have a dark sky in a huge swath of land, you would not have civilization there, which is good for really large swaths of land, actually, that humans just move away from there, you know. This is how capitalism is now thinking, actually, although I don't think that it can solve this problem. But this is how people are thinking now, that they would buy land, and just by buying it and not letting anybody doing anything on it, they could preserve the biodiversity and you know, let it flourish as it should, which is exactly our thing. We do not need to go to Hawaii and take land. I mean, of course, it's astronomically valuable, but instead of creating problems for people who are indigenous and who would take care of the land properly, we can unite with them politically, and we can actually gain from that, and have them gain from that too. So but yeah,
this is a way where yeah, we intersect with also the topic of climate justice and
Yeah.
social justice in general. Yeah.
Yes. And
Yeah, when
sorry.
Yeah, once you start to think on how to make life better and how to try to improve the life of others or making less and less problems, you kind of start to notice all these things that are going wrong because of often historical reasons also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Shashwata, please stop grilling Andrea about where she wants to fly for vacation. It's not about that.
That was not at all my intention, but I like your proposal that, we tell all the G7 or G20 leaders, every time you fly, just attach the telescope to your private jets, we can get some. Probably doesn't work that way, but
Yes, you would need a rocket because the X-rays, you need to go above the atmosphere. But I mean, maybe at one point the moon is far away from Earth and enough and doesn't have an atmosphere. So if we at one point settle on the moon, maybe we can have a local X-ray observatory or anything.
Big plans in this discussion right now.
I mean, it would be really cool.
That indeed it would be. Travis Rector comments on my rather provocative question, I guess, that there's no shame in being an astronomer. We have tremendous influence with the public and we have an opportunity to help people understand the problem. I completely agree. Andrea, if you would have any comment on this.
No, I'm super happy that he's here because he's one of he's a very active member of Astronomers on planet Earth, and I feel very honored that he is here and listen to my talk.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I don't know, I think we had quite a significant amount of discussion. I don't have any immediate question otherwise. Craig or Parit, do you have any other questions right now?
Not yet, but I would really like if Andrea sticks around for the next section.
Right.
If I what?
For the next section of.
Yeah. Sure.
So thanks again to all our viewers, but don't go anywhere. Please stay with us because we will have an Astro News session right now from Parit. So thanks a lot again to Andrea. Thanks a lot for giving us this wonderful talk, for discussing with us these issues. So once again, you will find Andrea's website and Twitter handle, as well as the details for Astronomers for Planet Earth. It's a wonderful, wonderful community. If you're an astronomy enthusiast, do consider checking out the kind of work they're doing, their community, all of that, and definitely do check it out. And otherwise, thanks for listening so far. I hope to have you in our next section, and I hand over to Parit for the Astro News session.
Okay, kids, close your eyes until I set my screen. Yes, this is it. Okay, I hope you can see everything.
Yes.
Yep.
Because it is going to be exciting. Okay, after all this serious nerd chatter and honestly, guys, depressing, let's bring you the exciting Astro news this past month. We will definitely scare you with more horrific climate news, but first, yeah, something to feel happy about, I guess. Okay. Important announcement for colleagues looking for jobs. As someone's grandma would say, just do the machine learning. Because the future, at least in NRW, North Rhine-Westphalia, is definitely AI. Because 8 institutes joined forces to form the NRW cluster for data and intensive radio astronomy. Big bang to big data. Claps to the person who thought about that. For which, Shashwata, thanks for the clap. For which they will get funding for 3 years or 3 million euros. I'm still in the early stages of my PhD, so I don't know how much 3 million euros is, but.
Wait, how many zeros is a million again? Anyway, sorry.
Yeah. Also, I mean, is that funding good or bad or like, I don't know. Okay. You senior people can say better. But University of Cologne is among the partners. Sorry, Andrea. Sources reveal that one Mr. Klaus at the purchasing department of Max Planck Institute in Bonn refuses to buy more hard disk drives and has stopped going to work. No wonder, since the last time the Bonn people pointed at a black hole, they ended up recording like 20 billion GBs of data within a week. And no, that's a real figure. And Klaus does not deserve to keep counting hard disk drives for the next 5 years, right? So we got to do the machine learning.
I also love that you took, sorry to interrupt, that you took this image actually that I showed earlier on in the talk of the telescope.
Yes.
So whoever remembers, there the low-far field was still intact. It's the same radio telescope, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think Craig told you plagiarism is allowed for AoT Koeln. So, but yeah, this is exactly the telescope that Andrea pointed to, and this seems to be intact in this image. You're right. More details are awaited about the cluster, and it is certainly exciting that astronomy could be the cause of the next leap in data analysis, and also improve data management efficiency, maybe. Andrea, I think you talked about the computation problem, right, in astronomy. So do you think AI stuff could help?
It's not about a computation problem, and rather where we get our electricity from, but yeah.
I mean, the problem also is that a lot of data is recorded and later handled by algorithms that people have to build, in the sense that everything is, let's say, essentially manual. But if AI is involved and data analysis is done at source, more or less, so that we only get the data that is relevant to us, we could end up spending less electricity to do the data analysis we really need to do. But yeah.
But with how the current development of technology goes, we will just have more data. I mean, the EHT or whatever you were mentioning. So this is also it's producing a lot of data, but also SKA and CTA, they will all produce huge amounts of data, and obviously one really needs to think about how to handle these data. So, and now if there are people out there that have just worked with algorithms so far, then they come around and work in astronomy now for a change.
Okay. You're right. Well, I think somebody should do a PhD about this. Actually, somebody should just sit around, make graphs, plots about how much data we have versus how much data we can manage with AI.
Right, you can make a second one.
A second? I can no. Please let me finish the first one, Shaswata. Okay. Well, we move on to flying, since we were discussing a lot of that. Next up is Sophia, which flies from Tahiti now, or did fly from Tahiti. And no, I'm not talking about the Instagram influencer Sophia who goes to vacation every 3 months on a faraway island, but the Sophia telescope, which is the stratospheric observatory for infrared astronomy, which is basically a Boeing 747 SP aircraft. Special, SP means special, modified to carry a 2.7 meter reflecting telescope with an effective diameter of 2.5 meters. And it basically flies into the stratosphere at around 38,000 to 45,000 feet, and puts Sophia above 99% of the Earth's infrared blocking atmosphere. So next time we talk about Sophia on Astronomy on Tap Cologne, I hope our 7 regular viewers will remember exactly what Sophia is. So I don't have to repeat all of these basics. Come on, guys. So I will just tell you a bit more about what happened. So normally flying from Christchurch in New Zealand, Sophia was deployed this time from the Polynesian island of Tahiti in July-August 2021. And on board Sophia is, of course, the great receiver, which is basically German receiver for a German receiver at terahertz frequencies. I worked on it, so I'm ashamed that I don't remember the full form, among other instruments. And GRADE itself is an instrument for spectroscopic observations in the far infrared between 1.25 and 5 terahertz, which is also wavelengths between 60 and 240 microns. These wavelengths are not accessible for ground-based observatories due to the lack of atmospheric transparency. There's just a lot of water, and with climate change, it's even more water in the in the atmosphere now. I'm just being smart. I don't know whether it affects our observations at all, but everything is about climate change, guys. Several interesting objects were observed, including the feedback targets in the Milky Way center and atomic oxygen in the mesosphere also. So it's not just about starry stuff. If I expand a bit about what this means, feedback is a survey which studies massive star forming regions. And in doing so, researchers basically want to understand the influence of star forming activities on the formation of other stars in the area. So whether they hinder the process or of star formation or not. And there's also HIGAL, which investigates how chemical reactions in the interstellar medium are influenced by high energy particles, which is also basically cosmic rays. All of this flowing through the galaxy, and we try to catch it with SOFIA. Two remarks here, or one. I will not speak much about Tahiti since I'm not from there, but this is a land ravaged by colonialism. Tourism, I mean, everything is fine. I mean, Tahitian people loved the fact that SOFIA was there, but tourism is just overrunning the island, and locals are dependent on European or American tourism to earn a living. I mean, this is a place where indigenous knowledge of locals and their connection to the ecology of their land could have served as a way out of the climate crisis if their rights were respected and indigenous people were given space to continue their livelihoods on their own land, by the way. But this is also not just me saying it.
I hope not.
Well, right now it is, but I guess through Andrea, I have the support of Astronomers for Planet Earth, at least. In its new, so this is also a fact which basically the latest report of the IPCC recognizes. And by the way, Craig, I know you're pissed that this is not space news, but Earth is also in space, so please.
It's fine. This is important.
Yes, thank you. Absolutely no points to the IPCC or any government for recognizing this, because it is something that we have known forever. Modern colonialism-inspired ways of managing land and forests have led to the doom and destruction of huge swaths of forests, which would have otherwise been taken care of by indigenous people who have been doing this for centuries anyway. And in most cases, they've been doing this without harm to biodiversity, right? And I quote an article from the World Resources Institute. In its new special report that you can see in the slide, in this new special report on climate change and land, IPCC recognizes the importance of securing community land for climate change. Recent research shows that indigenous and community lands are a globally important carbon sink, holding at least 22% of the carbon stored in tropical and subtropical forests, and at least 17% of the total carbon stored in forests. There is considerable potential for carbon to be stored on degraded indigenous and community lands, which have been already ravaged by various phenomena like colonialism. And if they were secured, better protected and restored, we could really get back in the game. only 10% of the world's land is legally recognized as belonging to indigenous people, with another 8% designated by governments for these groups use. But even that 8% is always, they have to fight for that all the time, with a sword hanging on their heads. I mean, these groups are critical for the world to have any chance of holding global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees. Unless we call out the commercial interests of the corrupt government officials and big companies that always work against indigenous rights, I doubt, and I guess we doubt, it will be possible to hold the climate crisis to such an ambitious ceiling. And by the way, Shashwata, please check what you say. Warm welcomes are not cool anymore. We need to
Come
change
on,
our
man,
introduction
we're in
habits.
Cologne, where it's always like cloudy and freezing. I'm allowed to say a warm welcome.
Oh no.
Okay, Andrea, cold welcome to you.
I mean, I would check again with you next month, but like, seriously.
Yeah, right. I need to work on a new phrase. Warm welcome is not good anymore. Okay.
What about wholeheartedly?
Oh,
A wholehearted welcome. Okay.
yeah, that's better.
Right.
But when you say hole, it makes me think of this image, right? There is a big hole in the forest land.
Yeah.
So not working also. Yeah, by the way, this image is from Germany. This is the Hambach forest. I was surprised to see the Hambach forest from an aerial view, because I thought it's a big, huge forest which is still being preserved somehow. But that's it. I mean, this is, you can imagine the whole swath of land that was deforested for this little swath of land to be left, and even this is threatened now by coal companies and the government.
Oh
So,
shit! I did not really look properly apparently at the picture. I somehow just had this Tahiti image in my mind and thought this was some weird place in Tahiti, because in the back it looks like there is a beach or whatever. I mean, I don't know. And yeah, that's sad.
yeah, I mean, the one thing that Europeans and basically people everywhere need to look at is their own backyards and front yards, because everything, I mean, stop giving Earth a buzz cut, as my friend would say.
But yeah, North Rhine-Westphalia is particularly unpretty.
Yeah, right.
So if you visit, so yeah, I know it's a bad thing to say, but in Bavaria, it's in some places it's much more beautiful because we have a diploma major. But Bavaria is not the only state where that is. But I remember driving, whenever we drive through North Rhine-Westphalia, it's just one coal thingy next to another one. So it just, yeah.
Yeah, and this will also save some emissions, because if we have local forests, nice, pretty forests that we can visit, and dangerous forests, not like easygoing forests, like 2.5 level difficulties does not work. Good difficult forests around you, if you can go to them, you will also not need to travel to Bavaria, right? I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
So having a forest nearby is
yeah.
Okay, coming back to space stuff, we end our discussion with the tweet of the month.
Oh yeah, this one.
As soon as it's time to go to space, I'm sure I will forget my mask, as always.
This is two memes in one.
This is a layered meme, yes. People are getting there's so much lack of space now on social media that people have to smoosh lots of memes together. But yeah, this meme refers to, this GIF is about the recent and many recent launches of SpaceX, which is usually successful now, versus the other axis of failure, might I say, no offense, which is just, yeah, I mean, these days rockets can also fly horizontally, as you can see. If you look at it that way, sorry.
Just one time they can fly horizontally. Or did this land safely?
Analyze the data. Maybe it's not a failure. You know, it depends on how you look at it. It's just, yeah. yeah, but we are thankful to all these people on Twitter who have time to do all of this. And with that, I hand it back to you, Shashwata.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Perth, for the very entertaining presentation of Astro News. Yeah, with that, we will finish our session for today. Thank you all again for joining. See you again, hopefully in a month, to all our regular 7 viewers. Thank you. Thanks, Andrea, for tuning in. And yeah, have a nice evening.
Thanks a lot for having me. And yeah, goodbye.